I'd been covering the Obamas from Chicago, where I was based for the Washington Post for quite a while during the 2008 campaign. And the more I watched Michelle Obama, the more I realized that she deserved to be at the center of her own narrative, not just wife of the more famous Barack. I followed her to Harlem and to Iowa and to South Carolina and to Texas, and she had a really firm, strong, clear message in her own right. As Michelle Obama herself says, she is a statistical anomaly. That's what she calls herself. She often says at various points in her life, when she got to Princeton, to Harvard, into the professional elite in Chicago, I am not supposed to be here. I think as First Lady, she's more urban. In many ways, she's more political. And she's more attuned to the working class and to income inequality than any of her modern predecessors. You know, I spent more than 4 years writing this book, and I have to say I enjoyed every day of it. I liked the riddles. I like solving the riddles of reporting and the riddles of writing. And it's a challenge to write a book about someone who is so prominent and where there is a narrative that is so widely accepted of who she is. It was a real pleasure to find the distinctive bits, to find the surprising bits, the things about her life that we didn't know, and make all of those connections. I was able to interview dozens of people. I interviewed relatives and mentors and mentees, people she worked with. I followed her path to Princeton and Harvard. And then one of the lucky things was that I had colleagues who had interviewed her mother, Marianne Robinson, who lives in the White House. They shared those unpublished interviews with me. And then, of course, Michelle Obama herself has spoken hundreds of thousands of words, and there are transcripts, there are videos of things she said, and I mined those statements and those speeches and those Q&As for just really great details about her life. She was not made available to me for the book. The last time I interviewed her was during the first presidential campaign when I was working for the Washington Post, and I interviewed her a couple of times. But I'm lucky in that Michelle Obama, when asked a direct question, as she is all the time on the campaign trail and through her many, many outreach sessions, gives a straight answer. She's very reflective, self-reflective. And so I had her own statements. It was important to me in writing the book that her voice carry through this book, and it's not just what Peter Slevin thinks. Michelle Obama cares about her image. She likes control. She over-prepares for everything. She's determined to do the right thing. Determined, as she's often said, not to disappoint people. She says, I never wanted to disappoint my parents, and in that same way, she told an audience in Washington at Georgetown University, I don't want to disappoint the American people. Part of that is that she is very controlled. She's often, makes sure that she's in very controlled settings when she's interviewed, for example. And she also has used the media in really interesting ways. She's on pretty much every social media app and platform that there is to get her own message out on her own terms. So Michelle Obama's life is so firmly anchored on the south side of Chicago, where she grew up. She was born in 1964. Her father worked at the city water plant. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom. And she had a very big, wide family. She once said that her heroes growing up were not astronauts and not musicians or movie stars. They were people she could touch. Many of those people were people she was related to. And the book goes into great detail and I think tells some wonderful stories about Michelle Obama and her family and her experiences growing up in Chicago at that particular time. Her father worked at the city water plant. He worked in Mayor Daley's Democratic machine. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom, which was somewhat unusual. At the time, they were both very deeply involved in the lives of Michelle and her brother Craig Robinson. She tells a story about her grandfather, Fraser C. Robinson Jr., who came north in the Great Migration to seek his future in Chicago. And he had a pretty rough go of it. And she learned from her grandfather, who was very stern, that your destiny is not written before you're born. In other words, you can be who you want to be, but not in a naive way. Her family taught that of course the deck is stacked, that we live in a racist society, but that you shouldn't let that get in your way. You've got to move on. And that's the message that Michelle Obama gives to audiences to this day in the White House.